Hi there, I'm Michelle Singh, and I want to welcome you to the Restful Teacher Challenge. Now, I created this challenge because I have been on the other side of burnout. I have been on the other side of dread. I have been on the other side of drained, okay? And I know what it feels like to be completely overwhelmed and stressed. I know that feeling of being pulled in thousands of different directions. And I know what it feels like when everything is all too much and my brain and physical body and spiritual being is at capacity. So I hope that you're able to gain practical insights from our guest speakers and fellow educators and professionals who will be sharing with you on this challenge. So thank you for joining the challenge, and let's meet our special guest speaker for today. Welcome back to the Restful Teacher Challenge. I'm Michelle Singh, and I am here with Miss Gina, and Gina is going to be our very special guest today to talk about rest, but she has a very interesting perspective because of her role in this world. So Gina, will you share a bit about who you are and the important work you do in our world, both personally and professionally?
So, first of all, welcome. Thank you for having me, Michelle. My name is Gina McCauley. I'm a labor and employment attorney. I've been practicing law for over 20 years. I know I don't look like it, but yeah. And I'm also a director of employee relations for an employer that has about 6,500 employees. So I use my legal expertise to help us comply with labor and employment laws. And then I am the founder and CEO of Engaged EEO LLC, which is my HR consultancy company where I help employers who want to do the right thing. And also you can find me on TikTok and Instagram as Sis from HR, where I give advice to employees and managers about how to navigate some of those systems at work so that I can help people have a great day at work. So I talk a lot about FMLA, ADA, discrimination, harassment, retaliation, those kinds of things.
So one of the reasons I definitely wanted you to be in this conversation for the Restful Teacher was, of course, I know that you have experience with embracing what a restful routine and a restful life looks like. So I would love, as well as your unique perspective being in HR and the legal background. But first, let's start with, what does rest look like for you, especially in your field where you are dealing with people who are seeing the effects of not resting, right? When they have to take leave in FMLA because of health issues. So how has that like inspired you or motivated you to incorporate rest in your life to not get to that point?
I think one of the biggest things that I learned is what really matters. I get to see people when they are going through really difficult times, and I get to see people who feel as if they've sacrificed a tremendous amount for their jobs, and then when they needed the support the most, their jobs didn't show up the way that they thought their jobs would show up. I also am the one that is in the room when they're deciding how to handle these employees who have had some type of event happen in their personal lives that has impacted their performance, their conduct, or their attendance. And so it just made me very clear about not sacrificing myself for my job. And as a little bit of a workaholic or an overachiever, I guess is the best way. I do have a tendency to overperform, which we all know is a trauma response. And a lot of Black women in my generation, I'm Gen X, it was drilled into us.
Yeah.
Over deliver, above and beyond, work twice as hard.
Yeah.
And what that comes from is teaching us that we're unworthy and we got something to prove to somebody. But I see what happens when they give more than they should have. And what happens is you end up bitter. When you are sacrificing being present with your kids and then they fire you on the drop of a dime, right? After you've made all these sacrifices. So I see what it looks like to give more than you should. And so I'm committed to doing an incredible job, to delivering what I said I would deliver, but also keeping my health first, keeping my family first, keeping my passions first. My business is important to me and I'm not sacrificing it. I will never be in a situation where I have one stream of income because I have seen people get fired. They end up with the wrong manager. They could be fined for 10, 15 years, get a new manager, and then all of a sudden there's a problem. So I think my perspective when it comes to rest and taking care of yourself is that I see far too many people set themselves on fire. I see far too many people give up far more than they should to a job that will not give up even a quarter of that to them. And so I see it when these things go sideways, but I also see people who get it and understand it and they navigate these spaces in ways that some of us do not. And that's kind of part of my mission as well, is to teach you all the behind the scenes of what happens when these decisions at work are being made so that you might make some different decisions that are in your extreme best interest. not just in your favor, but they're like, I am in this place. They do not own me.
Mm.
They do not have control of me 365 days a year, 24/7. I'm in this space. I'm going to offer value while I'm here, but I'm not sacrificing everything I am for this place. And I think a lot of employers expect employees to do that, but the employer wouldn't do the same for them. So I think it's, for me, rest from my perspective as a lawyer is I see these employment relationships when they end, and very rarely has sacrificing beyond what you should have worked out well. It usually ends up with that person being bitter. Now, the other side of that is I have also seen people walk away when they have, well before they hit their limit. I've seen people who have standards, values, they believe they're capable. And I have seen people, they don't whine, they don't complain, they don't create a fuss. I've seen people literally put their keys, their iPad, their badges on a desk and send an email saying, I'm out of here. And I have so much respect for those people, as opposed to the person who says, if they don't do this, I'm going to quit. You've been saying that for 15 years. You're still there. You're not going anywhere, and they know you're not going anywhere. So for me, I would say, as you talk about being a restful teacher, is that at the end of your days, these administrators and districts who you may be sacrificing too much for will probably not be the ones next to your bedside. It will probably not be the ones who are taking care of you. It'll probably be your family and your friends. So never forget what really matters. And that little job, as I'm often people say that little job, because that's the significance it should have. You should do what makes you happy, what you're passionate about. But in the grand scheme of things, you can get lots of jobs. It's not.
Wow, so many things to touch on here. One of the things that stood out is navigating spaces that's in your, not just your best interest, but your extreme best interest, right? So
yes.
What does that look like, especially like you talked about for teachers, educators who are part of systems that expect them to do the most for the very little, right? So how can an educator navigate a space like that in their extreme best interest, without sacrificing too much for those that won't give them what they deserve? Based on your experience.
One of the things that's important is for you to understand the way your system works. I'm not teaching people to turn over the table and to burn down the whole house, to ignore the system. The system will crush you. Never forget that. Never ever forget that there is a system, it will crush you. But I think far too many teachers, or just people in general, make assumptions about A, what's required for success, and B, that the system you're in will be looking out for you. The system will take everything you offer up to it. If you offer up to it time with your children, it'll take it. If you offer up your health and neglecting preventative health care and doctor's appointments, the system will take it. If you are in pain and you go to school in pain when you probably should go get that checked out, the system will take that from you. If you just operate on default and you're not paying attention, the system's not there to take care of you. You're there to take care of you. And there's nothing wrong with you saying, I'm a better employee if I'm healthy. I'm a better employee if my kids are happy. I'm a better employee if all of those things are in place. So I would say the first thing is understand the system. And when you understand it, you can then leverage it in your favor. One of the things, in my last job that I had, I was the general counsel of a state agency, but I always had side businesses, this or that. I would take training that the agency would pay for that would make me more valuable in the outside world. There was one point at which, my boss was like, we need to make some compliance training more interesting. I went, and they wouldn't necessarily give you a $50,000 raise, but they would pay for $50,000 of training over the course of a year for you to go to all of these places and that. So when I figured that part of the system out, I was like, oh, they're more likely to approve training than to approve a raise. I leverage that. Every training.
I was saying that's so true. That's such an important point to consider.
Yeah. The other thing is, for those of you who want to move up into administration, promotions don't usually come from hard work. The hardest worker, or the person who's overextending themselves, is not necessarily the person who's going to get promoted. And I know districts are a little bit different, where you have in Texas, you have to, go get additional certifications for things. But the people who get picked are usually people who have good relationships.
Yep.
And Black women, we got told, go get the credential, and your credential is the key. And that's not true. It's at some point, credentials will get you in the door, but it won't take you to the upper floors. That's relationship. And so some of you, when we talk about, I don't want to get too far off track, we're talking about rest. Figure out the system, and don't go in with your preconceived notions. Don't believe what they say at the welcome brunch or whatever they have, the convocation. Don't believe what they say, watch what they do. There is a system, and things work a certain way where you work. and figure out how it works. And then how can I get the things I also want out of this? You should never go to work and not have an agenda for yourself. You should never go to, oh, I'm just going to go and, I'm going to go for 30 years. And then at the end of it, they're going to give me a pension. You should have a yearly goal. This is what I want to accomplish in my life. This is how work fits into it. And so when you talk about rest and teachers, I would say the first thing is understand the way that things work in your district. Understand that you may be eligible for FMLA. Now, FMLA or ADA, reasonable accommodation, there are different rules for teachers who are in primary and secondary schools, but learn those rules. You can still take it. It's just the district has additional options that other employers don't, and that's to make sure that the education of children can continue. But it doesn't mean you can't take leave if you need it.
Yeah.
And so I would say, understand the systems, exploit your rights, all of them that you're entitled to. Some of you have never even read the employee manual. They handed it to you, said, sign this form saying you read it. You never went in there. You don't even know what leave is available to you.
Guilty, guilty, guilty. Let me tell you.
Yeah. You don't know what benefits you have access to. You do open enrollment. You don't even check to see what the optional benefits and plans are. You select disability insurance. You don't even know what your waiting period is. You didn't check the box to say wait 14 days after a car crash before benefits kicked in. It's all those little things that are part of work that are designed to take care of you. One of the best things that ever happened to me, I was 20 something when I started working for my previous employer. And like the day we were signing up for stuff, there was a Black lady and she was in orientation. She was doing our orientation and got to the benefits section. And I'm 20 something. I don't know nothing about nothing. Baby, when we got to the disability section, she said, you get disability insurance. she said, you sign up for disability insurance. And what she knew was, and I've always had disability insurance the entire time because I'm a single income household. And so if I get in a car crash, something I can't work, I'm in. So I've always had that. And so part of rest is you leveraging what you know about the system, leveraging the benefits that the employer offers to you, taking full advantage of that, but also knowing how to navigate the politics of the space that you're in. But at the end of the day, when you know all those things, you can take leave with confidence, or you can design your schedule with confidence. You can pursue your outside interests with confidence, and you can also let people know. You could tell people no. And I think a lot more people need to do that as well.
Yes, okay. I'm here taking notes because you're teaching me.
Oh,
So, okay, understanding the system to leverage it in your favor. I love that. And I love the example that you gave about yourself, in education, we know we don't get paid the value that we put in. That, we know that. And we know that they're just not, the system is not just they're not just gonna give us raises like that, right?
no.
That has been the conversation and the challenge my entire career. And even before, when I was in school hearing the teachers talk, right? And it's still the same. So how do you take advantage to do things that are in your favor that will allow you to, and I'm thinking back when, in my career, how did I take advantage of those things that grew my skills and deepened my relationships and my network? And that was like going to conferences and having those conversations with my administrators to pay for me to go to those, pay the registration fees. Because when I came back from the conferences, I would then take that information I learned and shared it with the other teachers in my school, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're growing your skills, you're gaining certifications, you're becoming part of networks that are some that are even global, and you can get opportunities from those that are even outside of the current system that you're in.
Yeah.
So that's one way that you can leverage the system in your favor. And sometimes they even have programs in education where you can pursue higher education degrees at a discounted rate. That's how I got my master's degree, my specialist degree, working on my doctorate. That's because I was getting a discounted rate through the program, through the district, because those colleges had relationships with the district, right? So that's another opportunity to grow yourself, grow your skills. And I know we're talking about rest, but this is important in rest because rest is not just passive sleep. Rest is also mental rest. You can participate in mental rest by growing your mental capacity and doing those things that bring you joy. Like I love to learn new things and go to conferences and attend workshops. I love to network with people. And if that's you and you are leveraging those things in your role, you're also resting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say this, if you're going to rest, stop arguing against reality. Stop arguing against reality. And I think that's one of the things I do well is that I'm practical. People like almost chuckle at how practical I am, but like I do not put roses and cotton candy on stuff. I say exactly what's happening. I don't argue against reality. The reality is that teaching does not compensate you in money for the sacrifices and the contributions you make. So you are going to have to extract value out of that school and that district in other ways that they are willing to pay. Mm-hmm. You pointed out, hey, tuition reimbursement or discounted education, or sometimes they won't give you a $50,000 bonus, but they'll pay for $50,000 of a degree as part of the tuition reimbursement program. Right. So part of rest means, and we've been talking about leverage and understanding the system, is what are you getting out of this job other than a paycheck? Because you can go put in those, and don't do that. Oh, well, it makes me feel good. You can feel good and make a lot of money too. There's lots of ways for you to feel good. You can, and you need to figure out how to leverage that. But not arguing against reality. You know what the salaries of teachers are. You can either put your fate in the hands of a district who has already shown you who they are, probably for a couple of decades. Or you could say, I want to make more money. Let me not beat my head against a brick wall. I'm going to extract everything I can out of this place. But if I want cash flow, what are my other options? Mm-hmm. So that's part of it too. I think a lot of folks get frustrated with the way things are. Well, sometimes the way things are the way things are, and we change the things that we can change. And one of the things you can change is you can change your vocation. If you don't want to do that, you can figure out how to create value and wealth in other ways.
Yeah, for sure. One of the other things that stuck out to me, Gina, that you said was, what you offer the system, it will take it. We give so much of ourselves to the system, and it's going to take it. But the system is also offering us time off. We also have those options where we don't take the time off because we feel like, and I'm speaking personally, it was easier for me to show up in my classroom sick than take a couple of days off because I was going to have more work when I came back. So I might as well just go to class and deal with the kids and have them do something where I don't have so much work when I came back from being out. Or take a doctor's appointment, put it off till the summer, keep putting it off until I got, a vacation, like a school vacation day. And now I missed the appointment, or I can't get the appointment in time that aligns with my vacation. So now it's been 2 years since I've gotten my annual exam,
Yeah. So a couple of things. So I was similar when I became a director level employee. One of the things I love to do for rest is to travel. That's my thing. Some people like to shop. I like to travel. I did not take a vacation for like 2 years where I would be out of cell phone range. I couldn't connect for 2 years and disconnect for 2 years, much like I can't disconnect from the classroom because it'll create more work. And that was a failure on my part because I had not built systems that would allow me to have rest. There's not a rest fairy that's going to come along and sprinkle something. You've got to build systems in how you run and manage your classroom and your curriculum that allow you to step away. You have to figure out how to make yourself irrelevant to a certain extent. So one of the things that happened over the years was my assistant I had systems built out, and my assistant knew how I handle things, and I knew who to refer her to. And she was so good that I could leave the country for a week and things would be fine. And so that was because I put in place systems so that my staff could run even when I was there. So you are going to have to build out a career that leaves a margin for error. If you cannot get sick and not have things kind of fall apart or create more work for you, that's a systems thing. So you got to step back. What are some things that I always have off the shelf that'll keep things going so that when I get back, I don't have as much? I used to be a substitute teacher when I was waiting on my bar results. So I kind of experienced going into a classroom while the teacher was out. So I kind of seen, and literally my only goal at the end of the day was for the kids to check off the stuff that the teacher had on the list. You got to build margin for error. You're going to get sick. You're going to need appointments. And honestly, is it going to alter the trajectory of those kids learning if you step away for a day? I don't think so. Now, if that's the case, then the whole system is in need of major revisions. What you're doing should not be so fragile that it will collapse if you walk away. So if that's how you feel like it's just easier for me to come in here sick, then I'm going to challenge you. What structure can we put in place? What processes can we put in place? What off the shelf solutions do we have? Is it that you go out recruit? See, in my district, you could almost recruit. When I was a substitute teacher a long time ago, it was over 20 years ago, teachers would have favorite subs. They would go recruit their replacement or something like that. I don't know. Again, that goes back to understanding your system and how your system works in that regard. But I would say if you couldn't step away, that's a process thing. We gotta look at what could we retrofit in your processes that allow you to be human, because you are.
Yeah. And so, relating that back to the classroom, what does it look like for you to not be there physically, but for your students to still be somewhat engaged? Maybe
Yeah.
it's a tool that you're using where you're giving them the lessons online. There are a couple things that I used in the classroom where if I was out, I could log in and see if my students was doing the work. I could see them in action, right? And what is the relationship like between you and your students where when you are not there, they're still respectful to the other
Yep.
adults in the classroom, right? And I know that every school is different. You might not have a sub. They might stick your kids in the cafeteria or the auditorium with one person because it's very different at every school.
Mm-hmm.
But what can you put in place just to ensure that you're not overwhelmed when you come back if you miss a day or if you miss 2 days, where things don't get super crazy and you can just kind of pick up with a little bit of ease and not so much stress?
Let me ask you this from an educator perspective. Are you able to build into your lesson planning and your scheduling like margins for error, like maybe 2 days out of this 6-week period, if we do nothing at all, we'll still be on track and hit goals?
You do have that kind of flexibility because a lesson doesn't always work out the way that you want it to. So I may have a lesson plan and I have on my plan, I'm going to teach, this, we're going to do chapter 1 today and we're going to do all these activities with chapter 1. And then we get to class and I only read the first couple of pages and we were only able to do one of 3 things. And now I got to, the next class, finish up what we started today because there may be a fire drill or something may have happened, where it interfered or the students were not responding the way I thought. So I had to pivot. So there's always room for flexibility, and we're always adjusting. So if something that we build is supposed to be a week and it end up being 2 weeks, we just have to make those adjustments.
Yeah. So I would say, as we're talking about rest, you should by default build in rest days for you in your planning. Like you should build, and in that way, if you're out, you don't fall far behind because you built in some margin for error. So if you're having a chronic condition, I think when you're doing your lesson planning, part of it should be, oh yeah, I have flare-ups every 3 weeks. Let me build in a dead day. Like if I don't have the whole, let me just go ahead in advance. If I'm there, great. But if I'm not, we're not behind because when you were building your plan out, I didn't know if you had that kind of flexibility.
But that's interesting you say that because it's making me think, right? So when I used to have Freedom Fridays, and on Freedom Fridays, every couple of weeks, my kids, I taught high school language arts, they got to choose a book that they wanted to read for that, for that time frame. And it was independent reading, but we had activities that we did together as a class to talk about their individual books. And so on those Freedom Fridays, they would work independently to give me some time to be, behind the desk, so to speak. But then we would also do activities together because I had block schedule as well. So we were together for 2 hours. And so I built in those Freedom Fridays in my, scope and sequence because I knew that I needed that time. But I also wanted to give them an opportunity to explore a book or topic of their own choice. So it wouldn't be like they just had a free day because they didn't have a free day.
Yeah. And so what you're pointing out is probably at every grade level, you had high school, but probably at every grade level, you could train or teach the kids to do independent study in the classroom. So if you were out for the day, it's not like, oh my gosh, what do we do? You've already trained them, or they already know this is how I do independent study. And independent study is good, right? When you have to teach yourself or whatever. So I would say that if we're talking about processes and structure and leaving margin for error, I do think when you're doing your planning that you should bake in independent study, not just on Fridays, but just so let's say you're out. They know how to, if I leave instructions for them and I'm not standing over them, they still know how to execute and they still know what the expectation is. Are you teaching them to be independent? Are you designing your classroom in such a way that you literally have to be there to keep things going? And of course, some teachers I have a sister, she's special education teacher. There's different requirements for that. But in all of that, how can you build more margin for error?
Yeah.
How can you allow yourself to be human? You're going to get sick. You're going to need to go to the doctor. You don't need to be superhuman in order to do this job.
Yeah. So building in the margin of error when you plan out your week, when you plan out your 9-week period, your semester, as well as building in your rest, because what you do for rest can also be modeled and done with the kids. So if you're doing, those physical, physical movement is important for the students to do. So that's going to give you physical rest, but it's also going to give the students that physical movement, that physical rest too, if you're doing an activity together that requires that. So how can you build it in so you're experiencing it and also the students are benefiting from it as well? So that's key. That's important, an important piece of it as well with the planning of the rest. You don't have to just do it like by yourself. You can include the kids too.
You can include the kids, and like you said, you can include other resources. To me, you should have almost a bank Like
Yeah.
this is a film that they could watch. This is a YouTube video they could watch. This is, this thing that they're still learning that they can watch, and just bake that in so you could pull it off the shelf, or it's just baked in and it's a day for you to sit at the desk and just woosah. But yeah, you have some control. You have some
Yeah.
power, and you need to
Yeah.
use that to allow yourself to be human.
Yeah. And I realize that sometimes our curriculum can be a bit prescriptive depending on where we work, the type of school that we work in. But there is, even though it's a little bit, there's room for flexibility where you can, sprinkle in these different types of restful activities that you can do for yourself as well as your students as well, and have those room for, the margins for error, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And practice before you need it. Practice before you need it. Right? Practice and say, hey, could these kids learn independently? Right? Do I have the ability to design something that allows for independent learning? That's age appropriate, of course.
And then it's like a muscle. You obviously not going to give the kids a whole hour in the beginning to just sit there for an hour and do this. You're going to definitely, this is probably the type of learning experience that they've not participated in consistently to build their own muscle of being those kinds of active, independent, autonomous learners, right? And so you're going to have to help them build that muscle. So you may have to start off with 5 minutes, then 15 minutes, then 30 minutes. And then as you work with them and expose them to it, now they're able to work independently.
Yep.
So it's a building the muscle for you as well as building the muscle for the kids, for sure. Okay. I didn't even know where this conversation was going to go, but I'm glad that we're talking about systems and margins of errors, because these aren't things that we normally hear when we're planning in our classrooms. But it's good to put a name to it so that we can be more cognizant of, it's okay to be flexible. It's okay to bake in that time for mistakes, for errors, for things to change, for me to actually have that moment of woosah or rest or whatever it is. It's okay to do that, right? And calling that out is super, super important for us to hear, because we beat ourselves up when we're not just working, following, checking off, working, checking off,
Yeah, and the thing about rest does not take you away from work. Does not reduce your rest, expands your capacity. When you are exhausted and tired and running 24/7 and you never get to work on yourself or work on your work and you're always in it, there is clarity that comes from taking a break, from giving yourself a breather. And honestly, you should not feel guilty for baking into your planning.
Yep.
Okay, every 3 weeks or every other week, I'm taking Friday off. Even though I'm here, I'm taking Friday off. This is going to be a day for me to just breathe, let the kids breathe, let my brain breathe. We're still going to make progress. But to me, you bake that stuff in, that you go into it. And that's the part about learning the system. Like if you're a new teacher, and I don't know what the experience level is of your teachers, talk to older, more experienced teachers about what do they do to create independent study opportunities.
Strategies. Absolutely.
When you first start, you feel like I have to do it exactly this way.
Yep.
And the truth is you don't. 99% of the time, there's room for you to put your own stamp on it.
Yeah.
And be just open to the possibility that it is possible. Don't just dismiss it out of hand.
It is possible. And I love that you said that rest expands your capacity, because we tend to have these misconceptions about rest. First of all, as just being sleep, just passive sleeping, napping. That's not what rest is. That's why we have, this Restful Teacher challenge and the framework, because it's important that you understand rest happens in different forms. And it helps to not just build your mental capacity, it builds like your holistic being. It helps you mentally, physically, spiritually. And rest is a priority, and it's productive.
It is.
Rest is productive. Even if you have to go to sleep, that's productive, because you got to be, good when you wake up to step back into that classroom and do your duties.
Yeah. One of the this like game-changing thing I once heard was, I actually am pretty fast. It's like I'm faster than the people around me, and I didn't realize I was fast. I just thought everybody was just slow. Right? It's like, no, you're the abnormal one. They're actually normal. You are just blazing fast. And I didn't think about it because I'm just being who I am. And so what would happen is I would finish work that before ChatGPT, I can write anybody into the ground. You can't outright me. And it doesn't take me 3 days to write something. I just boom, crank it out. And I would just be cranking stuff out, but I would finish work finish a day's worth or a week's worth of work in 4 hours and think that I had to fill the other 4 hours.
Yeah. Oh my God. I feel you.
Yeah. Well, I can't just sit here. I said, but you don't understand. You just ran a mental sprint. Yeah, you can't sit there. Your brain just did more lifting in 4 hours than so-and-so is going to do it
Average
on
person.
week.
Yeah, it's true.
And you feel like, oh, well, I can't just see, I have to be doing, no, actually letting your brain rest because you just put it through a sprint and being in a headspace so that you can think strategically at a 35,000 foot level, discover new efficiencies is work. Being available is work. Being there to pick. And so once I had that mindset shift and I realized the fact that I'm here and able to answer a phone call if the phone rings or people are popping into my office asking me questions. So at a director level, I really shouldn't be doing tasks. I should be doing strategies and decision making. That's what I should be doing. But it took me forever to break out of that because but what has happened is I made more money than ever because I'm not in it. I'm making decisions. Being able to make decisions is my most valuable asset because guess what? None of my team is willing to defend the decisions that I made. Mm-hmm. They're not even willing to defend the decisions that they make. I'm the one that defends the decisions, right? And so because I'm able to say, yeah, this is the decision I made and here's why, and oh, it went sideways. Oh, well, these are the things I can learn from it, but not valuing things that didn't look like action. But the fact that I make decisions is valuable because everybody can't do that. Mm-hmm. The fact that I can explain why I made the decision is valuable. Everyone can't do that. And so when we talk about rest, acknowledge the fact that you letting your brain just sit there and y'all are performing. Right? Mm-hmm. You're in front of people presenting things. Yeah. Like Beyonce, right? Except you're having a Beyonce concert every day. Right? And so you're having a Beyonce concert every day. You are Beyonce. Do you think she doesn't rest? Mm-hmm. It has to be exhausting so the fact that you give yourself breaks, that you acknowledge that you're human, that you're not always at 100 miles an hour. And when you do have those sprints, build in a day to say, you know what, that's a lot. I don't write every day. If I write a 20-page report, I will not be writing the next day. That's going to be a day of emails and I'm here if you need me. I'm not going to do it because first of all, whatever I write is going to be crap anyway, because I'm exhausted. So I'm not going to write that day. I'm going to take a day or 2 or 3 off and then I'll write, and so rethink rest as something that is not productive. Rest is almost like butter or baking soda. It's a necessary ingredient in being a high performer, if that's what you want to be.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So rest is a priority. Rest is proactive, not reactive. And it has to be a priority. So I would love for you, Gina, because one of the things that you mentioned, was the open enrollment period, FMLA, ADA, and our rights. I said I was guilty of getting that code of conduct, signing it, because I just don't. You're reading 100 pages, but you don't understand it. I felt like that every time open enrollment came around, I would get on the phone with my BFF, who was also a teacher in the same building, and then I would ask her, "What did you put for this? What did you put?" And so that's how I selected, or that helped me in selecting my things for my open enrollment, because I just didn't know what they meant. I didn't know what the benefits were. So if you could give some tips about what would be the most needed things when it comes to really honoring your rest, as for your open enrollment, you mentioned short-term disability, but as it relates to honoring your rest and taking care of yourself, what are some must-haves during that open enrollment period? And when it comes to FMLA, ADA, and all of those things.
Okay, so for sure during open enrollment, you need short-term and long-term disability. Now, if you have been saving, you can self-insure yourself, right? And you can get away with just long-term, because short-term is usually like for like maybe 90 days or something like that. It's a shorter period of time. So if you're like, oh, I got enough money to cover me for those 90 days, I don't need short-term. But almost everybody needs long-term, because if you ever need it, you really need it. Mm-hmm. Right? So for sure, long-term, if you get short-term, call them, ask them about the waiting periods. Ask them to educate you and explain, because here's the deal, I see it every day. Nobody thinks that they are going to get sick. No one thinks they're going to get into a major car crash. Mm-hmm. No one thinks they're going to get hit by a car. No one thinks they're going to get shot. Mm-hmm. No one thinks they're going to get cancer. And those are all things that have happened to employees, literally traumatic brain injury from a gunshot wound. No one thinks those, and you don't want to think about those things, but I think you need to give the gift to your future self. And it was always about me having options. And so for sure, short-term and long-term disability, but your open enrollment, usually there are these outside companies that contract with your employer to offer these quote optional coverages. And you need to sit there and think about the worst case scenario. And you don't have to do it every year. Just do it once, right? Do it that once, do it every 5 years, because your situation is going to change. You may not need the same life insurance when you're older. If your kids are now grown and can take care of themselves, you may not need the life insurance. You may need a different type of insurance, but you need to think worst case scenario. What happens if I die? What happens if I get injured? What happens? Long-term care insurance is a lot cheaper to get it when you're younger. Run those numbers and say, what happens if? And then think about ways of self-insuring. And I must also say this about rest. You need to be investing. So whatever investment program or plan, you need to be consistent, especially if you're younger. If all you can afford is $200 a month, by the time you get to your 40s and 50s, that's gonna be a lot of money. And then you need to know what you're investing in. My own personal so I have a retirement, which is your 401ks, or y'all might be 459s for those of you who work for public sector, but it may not be called a 401k. We call it 401 something.
Yeah, 401k, 403bs are
yeah. So, but whatever that deferred compensation plan is, I have that, but I also have my own individual stock portfolio. Well, I must have many years ago been an insanely conservative investor, and I left my 401k at my last employer for several years. Didn't think about it, and then I was like, let me check in on it, and I logged in, and it had the rate of return. And the rate of return, mind you, this is over the last, I think, 3 years. It went back a certain number of years, but during the pandemic years, and it was 6%. I was like, inflation is more than that. I could have put it in a high interest savings account and made more than 6%. But my individual stock portfolio that I manage outside of my retirement accounts was at 89%.
Wow.
Because I invested in NVIDIA all of 2022. When it cratered, I said, no, I believe in this company. So I invested in NVIDIA. And that was also the year that I was focusing on building my percentage of Apple shares, or my number of Apple shares. There was a goal I had. And I was just, even though the market's bad, I was just like doing Warren Buffett says, when everybody runs away, you keep in it. And so when we talk about rest, I don't want to work the rest of my life. I don't want to be a Walmart greeter when I'm 80 because I don't have enough money. So if you don't want to work for the rest of your life, you've got to put your money to work. And even if you have just a little bit, when you're younger, just a little bit will go a long way. So needless to say, that day I rolled over that old 401k into a IRA at the same brokerage where my individual portfolio is. It was so easy. Even depending on your brokerage, they'll do it for you. And now I'm investing my own money.
Wow.
Because I was just like, 6% is just ridiculous. When you don't have a lot of money, you got to make that money work for you. So when we talk about rest, if you don't want to work the rest of your days, you don't just rely on that pension. Start sitting aside a little something on the side, and not just in the deferred compensation plan, but also think about having a portfolio of stocks that have been that you've already paid taxes on, because the difference is when I need money, I can borrow against my stock portfolio in the same way you borrow against a house. Okay. And so I can not sell my stocks, because it's basically what Elon Musk does. He doesn't sell his Tesla stock. He takes out big loans against his stock, using the stock as collateral. But you can do similar things. So it's not just that you can make more if you self-manage it. And it just so y'all know, this is not investment advice, But my current employer, 100% of it is in a low load. There is a fee. It just tracks the S&P 500. That's it. I don't pick individual stocks in my retirement plan. I just put it in funds, and it was at 30-something%. And the other one at my old job was at 6. I was so angry. I don't know if you follow me on Instagram, but I was just like, I was so angry about that. But when we talk about rest, investing your money so your money works for you, that's a part of it too, when we talk about that plan.
Well, can you clarify what the S&P 500 is?
Oh, okay. So it's a collection of stocks. Okay. I think it's 500 stocks. It's just a collection of stocks, like NVIDIA's in there, Apple's in there. You know how you have heard of the Dow Jones Industrial Average? S&P 500 is just another average. Yeah, it's a collection of stocks. And so what you do is you can buy funds that mirror it. So yeah, every major brokerage has an S&P 500 fund. You can do ETFs, or you can do a mutual fund. And the reason why it's usually either no load or a low fee is because it's not actively managed. It literally just tracks the market. The only decision they have to make is buying buying enough stock so it stays balanced. That's it. But there's no active trading or anything like that. But do your own thing. I picked the S&P 500. You can pick the NASDAQ. You can pick the Dow Jones. I just picked the S&P. That's just my preference. But you can just follow any of the average, because over time, the entire market goes up. So you don't have to worry about individual stuff. So that's up 30-something%. But NVIDIA, I think my NVIDIA is up 600-something%, that one stock.
So the gist of it is, even if wherever you are in your career, starting off, midway, soon to retire, you have to, you have to put away the money, and you have to leverage what's being taken out of your paycheck, and what you're saving, so that you have something to look forward to when you get to that retirement age, so that you can take those vacations. You don't have to go and pick up another job just to make ends meet, and you can start that as early as the beginning of your career, making those
Yeah.
things.
And it does, and it's far more powerful the earlier you start.
And don't do it on your own. Like in this conversation, there's probably terminologies that Gina shared that you don't even know, and you don't know about investments. That's not your forte. But find a financial advisor that can help you with those things, help you determine where you can, what's the best route for you and your retirement planning.
Yeah, and I promise you, if y'all got a 401k, whoever the company is that runs it, they offer advice. Like they offer tools, they offer education, they offer all of that stuff. And I just happen to have my own, like I tell them what to do. I was like, hey, find me a free fund or a a fund that tracks the S&P 500. That was not what he was going to recommend to me. He's probably going to recommend something else, but I told him that. The other thing is, since we brought it up, I follow Earn Your Leisure, is where I learned a lot of stuff. That's a podcast.
Okay.
Wall Street, huh?
No, I'm right. I'm thinking of it. Earn Your Leisure. So I'm like,
Earn
okay,
Your
let me write
Leisure,
that
they were a lot better during the pandemic. I'll just say that they've blown up since then, but they have like a training academy. Wall Street Chapter, I follow him on Instagram. But there's lots of online influencers, but at the end of the day, you can read some Peter Lynch books. They're oldie but goodies, but you should be able to get them for like 99 cents.
down.
And then the one that really transformed my life, and we're not talking, but as we talk about rest, Warren Buffett has a biography called The Snowball, and it's about this thick. I'm trying to see if I have it around here. It's about this thick, called The Snowball. And I listened to it on a trip to Yosemite.
Uh-huh.
And that is what caused me to invest in 22 when the market was down. Because basically he goes through the story of his life. That also follows the story of the different investments he's made over the years. But I highly recommend, if you're like on fire about that, The Snowball. And if you are later on in your career, maybe your 40s and your 50s, I'm in my late 40s, and I wish I had learned about it in my 20s. But even in my late 40s, in 2 years, what I've been able to do in the stock market has been destiny changing. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, so I'll just say that it's never too late for you. Just understand your risk, get educated, and always be smarter than your money. Your money should never be smarter than you.
Yeah.
And I'll there.
That's inspiring, just to know that you were able to, you said destiny changing in just 2 years at
Mhm.
this stage of your life. It
Yeah.
is never too late. And I mean, 2 years is not a long time. And you change your destiny.
Yes, but this is the thing. This is the thing, y'all. Most of you, if you got intense about anything for 2 years, could get similar results. It may not be in the stock market, maybe it's in real estate investing, maybe it's in something else. But if you said, hey, I'm tired, I don't want to work forever, and when I retire, I want my life to look a certain way, you could focus and get gazelle. Like Dave Ramsey says, I'm not a devotee, but he says you could get gazelle intense for 2 years, and you can do a lot. You could pay off a mortgage in 2 years if you got real drilled into it. So yeah, it's so even for those of you who are listening and you may be near the ends of your career, it's not too late, because especially if you started teaching in your 20s, the end of your career is in your early 50s, right?
Right,
There's
right,
plenty of life. There's plenty of life left in you, and there's second and third careers
right.
for you. But now is a great time for you to make the decision that your money is going to work for you, even when you don't want to work. If you really want to rest means not having to do. And so one way to do that is with money. So
Oh,
I
you
didn't know we were going
better
to talk about
say it.
investments today, but
Oh, oh, I didn't either. I wanted to touch on what do we need to know so that we could take advantage of what the system is giving us. And I
yeah.
mean,
So
that's part of it too. The investment is part of it.
yeah, your benefits include the offering of the 401k or 459,
Exactly.
whatever y'all call it, and then FMLA and ADA. Remember, they are there. FMLA gives you job protected leave to take care of not just yourself but also a family member. It also, yeah, if you adopt a child, you can take FMLA for that. So look up FMLA. School districts are covered. They are specifically listed, so they're covered under FMLA. And look that up, and it allows you to step away from work when you need to and return to your former position. So don't be afraid to step away. And if you are afraid to step away, I want you to examine your life.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. I know for me, I not just the pressure of I'm gonna have too much to do when I go back, but I don't want to take off because it might look like I don't take this job seriously. And I'm afraid of losing my job. And I feel that is the mentality of a lot of us.
Yeah. And so I think I think yeah, I'm trying to adopt their worldview, right?
Yeah.
I think the most dangerous place to be is a place where you have to fear stepping away, right? If
Mm.
whatever you've built is so fragile, if your relationship with your employer is so fragile and so fickle that you literally cannot get sick, is that a relationship you want to be in? Because that's not realistic.
Wow.
You are literally asking yourself to be a robot, and you're not. You're just not. You're not a robot. And so I want to challenge y'all to rethink working for organizations that don't allow you to be human. It is human to get sick. It is human for you to have a spouse who gets sick. It is human for you to have a child who gets sick. And if you are working somewhere where you cannot keep your job, if you have a temporary situation and you can't keep your job, I want to challenge you to go somewhere that will allow you to be human. But to me, it's the far riskier thing is for you to continue to work somewhere where you can't, that's asking the impossible for you. But the truth is there are federal statutes. So just say this, there's federal statutes that usually will get employers to do the right thing. Obviously a Family Medical Leave Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, for those of you who have chronic conditions, there may be some accommodations that make it easier for you to do your job. That's available to you. If you, Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, fairly new statute, it not only, it allows you to have accommodations at work to allow you to keep working, but you can also use that act in order to step away from work if you need to for pregnancy, childbirth, or pregnancy-related conditions. Those are the big three. And then at the state level, there's also protections for you. So I would say that there is room for you to get sick and step away if you need to. And let's say you can't return, and that's where the disability insurance will kick in if it's for you. But I would just say, you're not, going back to the early conversation, Michelle, you got to leave room for margin for error. There has to be margin for error. There has to be margin for human. There has to be margin for you to get sick. And if you're operating as if you're going to lose your job if you do this thing, then how safe really are you?
Mm-hmm.
And chances are you're not going to lose your job because they got to replace you with somebody.
And they'll do it real quick within the hour.
And you know what? If that's happening, if you literally are getting ill and they're not preserving your federally protected rights, then I think at that point you go get a lawyer, because that's crazy to me that they would be doing that. But I just think most districts have a handbook that allows for a certain amount of PTO. If you have PTO, use it. That's what it's there for. And that's just kind of, if you watch my videos, I say if you need to take leave, because think about all the things you're worried about getting fired. I'm worried about you dying.
And it's also, I think it's historical, it's cultural, where we have that fear. That's not necessarily what they told us, but we just have that fear of not being taken, not looking at us as if we don't take what we're doing seriously. And us taking that time is a sign of laziness because we don't want to do our jobs. I think that's, it's more embedded in us culturally and historically. And so we function that way. I had never taken FMLA leave my 20 years of working.
Yeah, I can relate, because, and so this is kind of the interesting thing. My last two out of the three of my last supervisors have not been Black. They've been white woman, and currently a white male. The white woman of a completely different lifestyle, very wealthy, she literally taught me that she actually taught me that she basically shoved me out the door. I remember one day I was not well. I was looking ill, and she almost made it an issue of, I question your judgment for being here. Sick. Go home. Like, she would order me out. She saw how hard I was working. I literally had a Caucasian woman who ordered me out of the building because, like, you're not well. Go rest. Go take vacation. Same thing. My boss, I just got promoted April 1st back into a director role. It took 2 years off. And he was like, oh, when are you taking off? And then finally I realized, I said, he's not asking me, when am I taking off for me? He's asking, when am I taking off? Because he sees how hard my team is working and they probably need a break from me. And so finally and I was like, oh, he said, take the whole week. And he wasn't doing that. So I had to have people who don't look like me kind of like say, actually, you're going too fast. We actually need you. That's one of the, it's not a take off because we don't need you or we're trying to get rid of you. It's take off is like, we don't need you breaking down because you holding up the whole world right here. So I'm lucky that I had bosses that were actually like, take a break. You're not well, go get healed and come back. And that's because they are very secure in their place in the world. They're very secure. And so I wonder if I had a different boss, would they have modeled that for me? But
Yeah.
I model them throwing up the deuces and be like, okay, bye-bye, I see them model that. So I think, but to your point, Black women in particular, we just have been socialized, at least Gen X. I don't know about, hopefully Gen Z and Gen Alpha are having a different experience, where we kind of hail Black women who worked really hard and sacrificed a lot up to this really high standard. Like sacrifice became worthiness, right? Everybody talks about Big Mama who did all of these extraordinary things and tremendous sacrifice and made water out of wine and, could feed 1,000 people with 2 fish, just incredible feat. She did it because she had to. If she had the choice to go to Maui for a week, she would have done it. She would have done that. We got to be careful about the stories we tell ourselves about the people we admire. And I told a senior leader this because he was trying to draw me into some mess, basically have me fix a mess that's not in my job description. And I was telling him as we were walking out of a meeting, I was like, I'm gonna get you for trying to get me into that. And I told him, I said, listen, in honor of my ancestors, I'm operating at less than 100% capacity. Y'all not supposed to work me into the ground. And I said, I can see retirement. It's just, he said, no, we're not talking about that. But I was being honest. I was like, in honor of my grandmother who's a maid and scrub floors, in honor of her, I'm not operating at 110%. I'm operating at 85. And because my 85 is better than.
Listen.
I need y'all to know, as we talk about rest, girl, I don't know how much time we have, but listen, I need y'all to know, I know that if you are in Michelle's community, that you are an outstanding individual. You not like them. They not like us. Okay, they not like us. Your half is good enough.
Listen.
Stop feeling like you got to get to the 100% to be worthy. And that's not a them problem. That's a you problem.
It is. So 100%. It is. And you're probably not there yet in that mind frame, but you have to get to that point where you can see, just like you talked about, you was finishing a week's worth of work in 4 hours.
Yeah.
I would do that and I would think, wait, am I doing enough? Because what I was doing was being done in limited time while everybody else was still doing the thing that I had finished. And I'm like, Is it me? I thought it was a problem with me.
Yeah.
You have to change that mindset.
It's all in your mindset, and mental work is work.
Every day.
Being available is work. It doesn't, just because you don't use your hands doesn't mean it's not work. So I want y'all to definitely respect that when you do a lot of mental work, your brain actually does need rest. Like physiologically, you need sleep. It cleans out your brain and all that good stuff. So don't get me started. But that is definitely a mindset issue. And so as you're talking about rest, I really want you to work on why you think you can't. Why aren't you worthy of it? Why isn't you running yourself into the ground, and then you got a coworker making the same amount of money, probably gonna get a promotion because they're not cranky and bitter because they haven't given more than they should have. So they got a much nicer personality than you. You always letting everybody know what you're doing and how much you're doing, and they're just as happy as a clam. You working yourself into the ground. They get the same paycheck you do, and they're gonna get a promotion faster.
Ooh, you're speaking truth. Listen, I hope this is an eye-opener for those listening, because there were some truth bombs that we didn't want to face that Gina brought up, and some mindset shifts that we need to make for sure. But ultimately, we want you to know that rest, you have the power to rest, and it's up to you to shift your mind around what rest is, because it is what you need so that you can be productive. And you need to prioritize it first and foremost so that you can be better for the work that you do. So as we come to a close, Gina, we talked about so much. If you could give one piece of advice to teachers about, just one last piece of advice about cultivating joy through rest, because if you are overworked and underpaid, which lots of teachers are, if not all teachers, you're going to be bitter a little bit, if not a lot. So how do you cultivate joy through rest?
It's so interesting. I took the last week off and I went to Washington State, the Olympic Peninsula, and went to Victoria, British Columbia, the whole national rainforest. And then I spent Wednesday. I spent yesterday at Mount Rainier. And just when you talk about cultivating joy, for me, there's nothing better than being up in the mountains, surrounded by snow-capped mountain peaks, waterfalls, glacier-fed lakes. I know what makes me happy, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I need a dose. So I think when you talk about joy and rest, you're entitled to it. And why don't you feel that you're entitled to joy?
Oui.
And why don't you feel as if you're entitled to rest? And I think that that's a question you should ask yourself, is what is going on that makes you think that if you just kind of pursue something that just makes you feel refreshed and happy and enlightened. And that trip was so mind clearing. There are thoughts that I had that I wouldn't have had if I wasn't driving through the mountains looking at stuff. So I would say rest creates space for me to experience joy, and joy is refreshing. And it's an important part of life. So I hope y'all create time to cultivate joy and also rest, because you're worthy of it. And also it makes you uh, much more productive than pushing through.
And with that, we thank Gina for being part of the Restful Teacher Challenge and sharing all of the truths with us, because there were so many. And we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for participating in the Restful Teacher Challenge. I hope you found our guest speakers' insights inspiring and practical. Take the time to plan and implement your joyful rest daily, and tell us about it in the community.